Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a closer look at a Star Trek Voyager episode that definitely gets people talking, Elogium.
It sure does. And for this, we've gathered quite a bit of material fan takes from Jammer's reviews, IMDb info, the usual Memory Alpha and Wikipedia synopses, YouTube analysis, even some script bits.
Right. So our mission, basically, is to sift through all the stuff about Elogium.
Yeah, we want to pull out the really interesting parts. We'll look at its two main plots, the space creatures and Keith's situation, how fans and critics felt about it, and maybe unpack some of the deeper themes like family, babies, relationships on a ship lost in space.
Exactly. We'll give you the full picture, the good and the maybe not so good, without getting bogged down in warp core physics or anything.
Let's dive in.
Okay, so Elogium hits us with two big storylines. First up, this encounter with some, unique space life forms. What did our sources say about them?
Well, they're described as protozoa-like, which is already a bit strange for space, but they have these really unusual features, like moving incredibly fast, supposedly up to 3,000 kilometers per second. Though some viewers pointed out you don't really see that speed on screen.
Uh-huh.
And they have these porous outer layers. Apparently, they absorb nutrients straight from space, eating nothing, basically.
Okay, space amoebas that eat vacuum. That's a choice. And they don't just float by, right? They interact with Voyager.
Right. The ship gets pulled into a whole swarm of them because they generate some kind of EM resonance field.
An EM field. Okay.
And this is where it gets really weird. The crew figures out the smaller ones are actually sexually attracted to Voyager.
Attracted to the ship.
Yeah, to its subspace emissions. They think the ship is like a potential mate.
Wow, okay. That's definitely not your standard first contact scenario. I remember reading something about a weird maneuver they tried.
Oh, yeah. To try and signal they weren't interested, they vent plasma to change the ship's look, make it blue, apparently less appealing, and then they physically roll the whole starship.
Roll the ship.
Yeah.
In space.
I know. The script even mentions needing full power to inertial dampers for that, which, fans definitely picked up on as kind of nonsensical in zero-G.
Right. You'd think orientation is relative out there. So one swarm of lovesick space things isn't enough, then a bigger one shows up.
Exactly. A much larger creature appears, acting aggressively. Maybe it's a parent, maybe a rival male, who knows?
And how does the crew react to that?
Well, Torres, being Torres, she immediately wants to, fight back, treat it as a threat.
A standard B'Elanna.
But Janeway holds back initially. She's always cautious with unknown life forms, right? Wants to understand first.
True. So how do they finally get out of this awkward space state?
It's almost anticlimactic, really. They just modify Voyager's subspace emissions. Basically, they make the ship less appealing, lose their sex appeal, as it were, and the creatures just lose interest and drift off.
It sounds like this whole plot line didn't exactly win over all the fans. The reviews were pretty rough, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Brain dead, silly, goofy. I even saw a space harem. People really question the science space life with flagella, attraction to subspace frequencies. It was a lot to swallow.
Yeah.
Though some did find it kind of funny, just because it was so absurdly different. Maybe the problem was trying to make attraction so literal, instead of metaphorical, like Trek often does better.
Definitely a bizarre one. Okay, let's switch tracks to the B story, which is all about Kiss and this premature Elogium. Remind us, what is the Elogium for Ocampa?
The Elogium is basically the one and only time an Ocampan female can conceive. It's their fertility period. Normally happens when they're about 4 or 5 years old.
Only once? Wow.
Yeah, huge biological and cultural deal for them. But here, Key starts going through it, and she's not even 2 yet.
Not even 2. And why so early?
The episode implies it's triggered by Voyager's run-in with those space protozoa, their energy field or something.
Okay, so the space creatures caused both problems. And this wasn't subtle for Keys, was it? What were her symptoms?
Not subtle at all. She gets these really intense, weird cravings for beetles, dirt, mashed potatoes with dirt, flowers.
Beetles and dirt. Yikes. Okay, what else?
Physically, she's running hot, rapid pulse, high blood pressure, and the big one, this mitral sac, starts growing on her back. That's apparently where an Ocampan baby develops.
Right, I remember that visual. A sack on the back. So, how did Neelix handle all this? Her partner suddenly facing potential fatherhood.
Not great, according to most sources. He comes across as super overprotective, really jealous, like Paris just helps her with plants, and Neelix gets possessive.
Oh, boy.
And he's initially very resistant to the whole fatherhood idea.
Yeah.
Makes some pretty cringy comments about wanting a son specifically.
Yikes.
His interactions with the doctor are famously bad, too. He's panicking, getting in the way. The doctor actually throws him out of sickbay at one point.
Throws him out. Sounds like he wasn't helping Keese much.
Not really, no. It undermined his character quite a bit for many viewers.
So Neelix is freaking out. What about Keese? This is happening to her way too soon. What's going through her mind?
She's understandably shocked, scared even. There's this immense pressure because, everyone thinks this is her only chance to ever have a child.
Yeah, that's intense pressure.
But she also has serious doubts.
Mm-hmm.
Is she ready? She's so young. She wants to keep learning from the doctor, keep growing herself. She wasn't planning on motherhood yet.
It really forces her to confront her future on the ship, doesn't it? Beyond just being with Neelix.
Totally. It raises questions about her own identity and goals.
So she talks it through.
Yeah, she have these really important conversations with Neelix, trying to get him to understand her feelings, and with the doctor about the biological side, the risks, the unknowns of Ocampa genetics.
Mm-hmm.
And we even get that nice little moment with Tuvok. He talks about parenthood being this huge responsibility, but also having infinite rewards. Coming from Tuvok, that carries weight.
It does. So after all that, what does Keese decide?
Ultimately, after really thinking it through, she decides not to conceive right now. Part of it is feeling she's just not ready. But the doctor also suggests the Elogium might have been, artificially induced by the protozoa.
Ah, so maybe it wasn't her only chance.
Exactly. It's left a bit ambiguous, but the doctor holds out hope it might happen again, naturally, later on. The episode also mentions the ibophore, this temporary mating bond thing, and how the window for conception is pretty short once it starts.
Gotcha. And how did fans react to this storyline? Was it as divisive as the space creatures?
Oh yeah, maybe even more so for some. You see words like icky, brainless, awkward.
Icky. Why icky?
I think partly the weird biology, the cravings, the back sack maybe.
Yeah.
And Neelix's behavior was a huge turnoff. Just widely seen as insufferable here.
Yeah, he didn't come off well.
And the whole Ocampa reproduction thing, only one kid ever. The foot massage ritual mentioned. A lot of fans just found it biologically nonsensical. How would a species survive like that?
Good point. No evolutionary logic.
Right. It's strained belief. And interestingly, some people read Case's decision as a kind of clumsy metaphor for reproductive choice or even abortion, given the circumstances.
I can see that interpretation. It seems like they were trying to tackle big ideas, but maybe the execution was fumbled.
That's a common critique, yeah. The alien biology felt arbitrary, pulling viewers out of the story.
Okay. Now, amidst all this chaos, something else significant happens at the very end of the episode. Ensign Wildman's pregnancy reveal. How does that fit in?
Yeah, it's quite a shift at the end. Wildman tells Janeway she's pregnant, and it's with her husband's child, conceived back near Deep Space Nine before they got stranded.
Wow, okay. So that lands right after Keese decides not to have a child.
Exactly. It brings that theme of procreation and the future of the crew right back, but in a totally different context.
Yeah.
It makes the idea of Voyager potentially becoming a generational ship very real, very immediate. It contrasts Keese's internal biological pressure with this external logistical reality.
And isn't there a story behind why this felt a bit sudden in the show's timeline?
Yes. Apparently, Elogium was written and meant to air way back in Season 1.
Ah, okay.
But it got pushed to Season 2. So when Wildman shows up, seemingly quite pregnant, having never been mentioned before, it felt like a continuity glitch.
Right. Like, where's she been?
So they later came up with the explanation that she's Haskatarian, and Katarians have longer gestation periods, a bit of a retcon to smooth it over.
Got it. A classic Trek fix. But regardless of the timing issues, her pregnancy really does hammer home the long-term implications of their journey.
Absolutely. Suddenly, it's not just about getting this crew home. It's about births, raising kids, potentially multiple generations living and dying on this ship, miles and decades away from Earth. It forces Janeway and the audience to really consider that possibility.
Which brings us back to those big themes we wanted to touch on: relationships, starting families, intimacy, all in this super isolated, high-pressure cooker environment of Voyager.
Yeah, the episode really puts different reactions side by side. You've got Neelix's panic and possessiveness.
Then Keese's very thoughtful, self-aware decision about her own readiness.
And then Wildman's situation, which seems more about connection to a life left behind, bringing a piece of that life with her. It shows there's no single right way to feel about potentially starting a family under these circumstances.
It highlights the immense challenges. Raising kids on a starship lost in deep space. That's a lot.
A huge responsibility,
Right.
yeah. Different from anything faced back in the Federation.
So overall, how does Elogium stack up critically? Sounds like a real mixed bag.
Very mixed. Jennifer Leon's performance as Keyes often gets singled out for praise. People felt she handled difficult material really well, brought a lot of depth to Keyes' dilemma.
Okay, that's good.
But yeah, Neelix's portrayal here is almost universally panned. And that's base protozoa plot.
Yeah.
Most people just found it silly or nonsensical. For quite a few fans, it actually ranks as one of the worst Voyager episodes ever.
Wow, one of the worst. That's harsh.
It definitely has its detractors.
Okay, so let's try and wrap up our deep dive into Elogium. What's the bottom line here?
Well, Elogium is clearly a very divisive episode.
Yeah.
It tries, maybe clumsily, to tackle some really big, complex themes. Reproduction, choice, relationships, the future. But it does it through this lens of, frankly, bizarre alien biology.
Yeah.
And a plot line many found hard to take seriously.
Right.
So you've got some potentially interesting ideas. Jennifer Levin doing great work, and the introduction of the whole generational ship concept. But it's weighed down by questionable science, awkward humor sometimes, and character choices, especially with Neelix, that really rub people the wrong way.
It definitely gives us a lot to think about, flaws and all. Maybe as a final thought for you listening, just imagine being on Voyager, decades from home, no guarantee of return. How does the idea of starting a family change in that context? What becomes important?
Yeah, what does this episode, even with its weird space creatures and everything, tell us about those basic drives for connection, for family, for continuing life, even when you're facing the unimaginable? Elogium, for better or worse, gives us a glimpse into those very human and Ocampa dramas playing out light years away.